Hey, hi. In this video, I'm going to show you how to do secure AWS deployments from GitHub Actions with using OpenID Connect. As you know, OpenID Connect is getting very famous in nowadays at actually the GitHub Actions deployment or it could be any kind of deployments with using CI/CD tools. Okay, why? Because this is the service which is actually like any other authentication mechanism. Basically, this is a open authentication protocol which actually works on top of OAuth 2 framework, right? So it is nothing like it's like it's just like a single sign-on way of authenticating the some service, and then forth once you have the connections, then forth doing the actual job. Okay, so that's what the OpenID Connect does. Okay, so here our focus is on how do we do a AWS deployment from GitHub Actions with using OpenID Connect, right? So so here in this video I'm going to show you how does this OpenID Connect works for AWS deployments. Okay, in the sense, how does it actually connect to the OpenID Connect and retrieves the required tokens, and also reaches back to the AWS and also gets the required the security token, and then establishes the connection. Okay, so all those steps I'm going to explain you in detail in the next. Okay, and also after that I'm going to show you how does this GitHub Actions the connections works with OpenID Connect at real time. Yeah, all right. So with that note, before I walk to the first step of the demo, a kind request, please do subscribe my channel. That would really encourage me a lot. So with that note, we can just go ahead and see how does this OpenID Connect works or helps us to establish a connection to the AWS. All right. So I'm going to take you to the next slide. So here let's say so as you see in this PPT, it contains 4 boxes. Okay, so these 4 boxes actually helps you to understand how does the steps flows from 1 2 3 4 5. Okay, so as you see here, these 4 boxes contains 1 2 3 4 5 numbers. Okay, all those are number depicts the order of the steps that that works, right? These are the depicts the way how does the authentication mechanism flows. Okay, so basically wherever you see the AWS logo, that is a AWS account. All right, and wherever you see the GitHub Action, so this is a GitHub Action logo, so this is the GitHub Action place. Okay, and also the other token that you see or other logo that you see is a OpenID Connect logo. Okay, all right, so now we see how does these 4 boxes communicate each other, and finally helps us to get the required access to the AWS, and then forth GitHub Actions does the actual deployments. Okay, so basically this is how it happens. In the first step, the first step here is we need to create a IAM role in the AWS account, and to that IAM role you're going to attach the required permissions that you need to require to do a certain job in the AWS accounts. Basically GitHub Actions deployment is nothing but what you are actually doing certain tasks. You are creating a resource, you are deploying some configurations, you are making changes in the resource configurations. That's what actually deployment is all about. Preparing a WAR file and pushing that WAR file into a let's say EC2 instance. Yeah, or it could be you are directly hosting your code into the AWS Lambda maybe, or you are directly hosting on an Amplify. What are those? Basically nothing but it's doing certain task on the service. That's what I explained when you said deployment in terms of layman's. Okay, all right. So here the first task is here we need to register the GitHub as a identity provider. If you go to the IAM, I'm going to show you these steps in the real time in the AWS account next. So first one, here we need to register GitHub. So GitHub is a service. Okay, this is the independent service which actually helps us to maintain the source code, and also helps us to helps us with providing the deployment tools or CI/CD tool like GitHub Actions. Okay, so here we need to register GitHub as an identity provider. So here the identity provider of kind OpenID Connect. Okay, and that's what the first step is. So that's the first step where we actually create IAM role, create a OpenID OIDC or OpenID Connect provider data, right? And then you bind this role with the OpenID connection by using trust policy of AWS IAM roles, right? Then that marks a creation of establishing the connection between your IAM and the OpenID Connect. Okay, that's what the first step tells all about. I'm going to explain that. Okay, and the next step. Okay, once you have the once you have registered your role, once you are registered your role with the OpenID Connect by configuring the trust, then you will use the same role, right, at your GitHub Actions. Okay, so that's where the step 2 tells. Actually, when you use that role ARN into the GitHub Actions, okay, so and whenever you run that GitHub Actions, basically what does that GitHub Action does is action actually request to generate a signed JWT token. Okay, so basically JWT is a JSON web token. That JWT is nothing but JSON based web token, something like that. Yeah, and this is what happens in the step 2, right? So in step 2, whenever you run a workflow, what it happens is in the workflow you define saying like, this is my ARN role which is being configured with the OpenID Connect configurations, and then the GitHub Actions will call that particular IAM role and request the OpenID Connect to generate a signed JWT token. Okay, then in the step number 3, that is initiates from this box, that is from the OpenID Connect, basically issues a signed JWT token, and that will be returned for this step number 4. Okay, so basically you just follow the number. Okay, in the first number we have done with the registration. In the second step, the GitHub Action actually request for a JWT token, and in the third step, JWT token is been signed and returned back to the GitHub Actions. Okay, now let's see in the fourth step what happens. Okay, in the 4 steps, action sends the JWT token plus requested role ARN to the AWS. Okay, so basically, okay, that is where the usability of IAM role ARN comes in picture in the GitHub Actions. Okay, I'm going to show you that how you can configure that. So basically, GitHub Action has a JWT token, that is JSON web based token, something like that. Plus it also has the ARN ARN of the AWS, to which it has to establish the connection. With using these 2 configurations, it will go to the account and it will it will ask for the authentication. Okay, that's where the step 4 does, right? So once the request goes to the step 4, then the step 5 starts. Okay, that's where it validates the JWT token first thing, verifies the token is allowed to assume a role. Okay, assume the requested role. That's the second step it does. And then once the first and the second task are being validated by the AWS, it actually sends a short-lived access token. Basically, everything in the AWS is works through the STS, that secure access token. Yeah, so basically it returns a access token of certain lifespan. Okay, let's say 5 minutes, 6 minutes, 1 hour, something like that. Yeah, all right, so that token will be returned to the GitHub Actions, and then the connection to the AWS is been established, and then fourth, the GitHub Action starts to do its job. Okay, all right, so basically this is what it happens. Now I'm going to take you to the my GitHub account. So first of all, so this is my GitHub account. I'm going to come back to this GitHub account. How does this GitHub Actions works with using GitHub Action with using the the OIDC provider? Just a while. Okay, so before that, I'm going to help you with the the task that you need to do in the IAM. Okay, so this is my identity and access management page of my AWS account. This is my AWS account. So in this account, if you go to the access management, there are 2 options here. One is the role, and the other one is the identity provider. Okay, so this is the place where we actually configure the OIDC connection. OIDC, that is the OpenID Connect, as the identity provider for your GitHub Actions. Okay, so basically how did I do? I have already did it, but you can do it again, something like this. Okay, you click on the create identity provider, then choose the option called OpenID Connect, and here you have to provide the this data. Okay, so for example, the provider data, provider URL will be something like this. Okay, so this is static, you need to use this one for any kind of connections. Okay, something like this. Yeah, and then you're gonna provide the audience, something like this. Okay, there is an audience as well. Basically here audience is STS Amazon, Amazon.com. Yeah, so I'm going to select that. So just provide this one, and then click on a get thumbprint. Okay, so when you click on the get thumbprint, it will get a thumbprint. Basically, since I have already added the OpenID Connect URL already, that's the reason it is telling me now it is already there, right? So but when you do for the first time, it will not show you, but it will get you the thumbprint. Finally click on the add provider. Okay, so that's all. So basically once you click on that add provider, it will take you to here, and the providers will be added here. Okay, so if you see the summary of this the identity provider, So this is the identity provider data, that is token.actions.github user content.openid connect. Yeah, and this is the ARN. Okay, and then if you see here, so the audience here is STS, because we are actually using the STS service to assume a role. In the sense, GitHub Action is using the STS service and it is trying to assume the IAM role. Okay, and this is the thumbprint. Okay, basically they are the configurations. Okay, this is the first configuration that you need to complete in the IAM. Yeah, and then you go ahead and create a role. So here we have to create a role. I have already created for my uses purpose. I'm going to show you that as well. So GitHub. So for example, what is the role name? The role name is GitHub OIDC provider. Okay, so I'm just going to use that. So just search for this role. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the role, refresh it, right, and go to the role. So here I'm going to search my role. So this is the role I have created, and I will walk you through this one, and also I will going to show you how you can do this. Okay, basically this is none other like it is just like other IAM role. Yeah, and here what you have done is I have created IAM role with the administrative privilege. This is a demo. That's the reason I have just blindly added a blank. I just added blanket access. Generally in security term they call it as a blanket access. Okay, so very big access are being given to this role, right? So that is the permissions been added to this role, and I will go to the very important part, that is trust relationship. In the trust relationship you define everything. Okay, so this is the place where you actually bind the identity provider configuration that you did just a while with the IAM role. Okay, so this binding helps GitHub Actions to identify and does the next operations. Okay, so here what we are doing is we are also declaring a trust statement. Here we just declaring a trust statement which contains effect equal to allow, and in the principles we are using the principal type called federated. Okay, so federated is a type of principle that used during the identity provider kind of task. Okay, what does it mean by federated? In the sense, I was talking about the single sign-on. Okay, so single sign-on is a kind of a mechanism of authentication which is kind of federated. You just provide the credential once and that's all. Then final after that you can just reuse those credentials. Okay, that's what the federated is. Okay, so here in the federated what we are doing is we are actually giving the ARN of the identity provider. So if I go back to the identity provider, click on this one, you get this ARN. Okay, so that's what the ARN we are using here in the role trust relationship. Okay, so if I go to the trust relationships, just click on this one, and that's the ARN we have provided. Okay, all right, so I'm gonna go back to this one and explain the further one. So basically the federated is nothing but it is federated to a, that is OpenID OIDC provider. Okay, so this is federated to the OpenID provider. Okay, all right, so the next one is in the action. So what we are doing is I'm giving very limited actions. Okay, here the action is given to assume a role with the web identity. Okay, so this role is not a normal role. I'm going to tell you how I have created this role of type web identity. Yeah, and in the conditions we are we are adding certain conditions. What is the conditions? In the sense, this role can be assumed from this user. So I have this is my GitHub user name and this is my GitHub repo, right? And this is the condition that I am giving. In the sense, whenever the task called pull request happens, right, then only you have to allow it to assume. Basically that's what these are the conditions before you give this action. Okay, before you allow this action, these are the conditions needs to be met. Okay, yeah, all right. And then next one is now token actions GitHub user content.am. Okay, basically this is the STS service which we use it in this role. Okay, so basically this is the this is the actual example trust file. Anyways, yeah, I am going to share this trust file which you can reuse in your real-time configurations. Okay, now finally I'm going to show you one step how did I create this role. Okay, so I click on this create role. In this one, trusted entity types, I'm going to use web identity. Okay, and that's what I was talking about web identity when I was explaining the trust relationship of the role. Yeah, so you have to use web identity, and here you need to provide this token, right? Then you have to use the token actions GitHub user content.com identity provider, and then in the audience you have to use STS assume, right? Click on this one, click on next, choose your policies, right? Choose your policies, right? For example, let's say this one. I'm just going blind, okay? And then click next. Here you provide your role name, yeah, something like blah blah, and then you see the trusted entity. So then you see the trusted entity automatically get added. But this is still not enough, okay? I want to narrow down the trust relationship specifically to my GitHub repo and to my user, okay? So in that case, you will use this extended trust relationship, because so basically you see there is a difference here. This is bit and this is bit extended with the conditions operations here, but here the condition is very limited, okay? You see it's only checks sts.amazon.com, right? But basically it also checks if the request is coming from this user, this GitHub user, and this GitHub repo, right? Along with that, branches and certain tasks as well. So basically you are narrow downing you are narrow downing the action called sts assume role with web identity to a very narrow level. In the sense, only this repo GitHub Action can only assume this role, okay? That kind of configuration it narrow downs. All right, so basically with this configuration I have completed my the role, okay? So basically this is what the steps I did before I completed created this IAM role, GitHub OIDC role, right? Once you create this role, you're gonna get this ERN, and this ERN will be consumed in defining the GitHub Action workflow, okay? So now I'm going to take you to the GitHub Action workflow, right? So this is my this GitHub Action OIDC connect, yeah? So basically this is my repository I have created specially for OIDC demo purpose. I'm going to walk you through this workflow, and then I'm going to show you how does this works, okay? So basically this is none other like workflow. So this is like another workflow basically, where you are declaring the jobs and the the required configurations of the YAML file, which is acting like a workflow of a GitHub Actions, okay? So here name we have given AWS OIDC connect, and it will get invoked on push, okay? And also declaring certain environment. So I'm going to use US East environment, right? And that's the reason variable is been given as AWS region. In the permissions we are giving the write and read. This is very important, okay? So basically this is the thing which actually defines what kind of JWT token that you need from the OpenID connect, okay? So if you keep only read, maybe you may not be able to do a write operation on the AWS account, okay? So that's the reason ID token is always should be right to actually deploy some resources in the AWS account, okay? So basically you need to follow the same syntax, yeah? All right. So basically this is what it tells, okay? This is the ID token write permission is required for requesting the JWT token, okay? And the content read, this is the required for checkout and actions and checkout, okay? So these are the primary informations about these permissions, yeah? All right, I'm going to take you to the next job definitions, okay? I have declared one job, and this is the job, okay? So basically demo OIDC. My aim here is to demo OIDC. How does it work, okay? That's the reason that job is being created here, and this job will run on Ubuntu latest, yeah? And in the steps, okay, the steps of these jobs are something like this. First one is default one, that is cloning the repo, and it uses action checkout. And then this is the typical, and you need to remember always, okay? This is to use OpenID Connect based authentication or OpenID Connect based configurations to establish a connection to the AWS, right? You have to use this way, okay? So basically I have given configure AWS credentials as a name, but it actually uses the connection, okay? It actually uses this API, yeah? That is AWS Actions configure AWS credentials @ version 1, yeah? So this is the the step name that you have to define to actually consume the OIDC based authentications, okay? So this one, so this use operation, it uses certain parameter as well, okay? That is which role it has to assume, what is the session name, and what is the reason, okay? So here that is the ARN, but which we have declared here. If I can copy this one, just copy this one, and I'm gonna do a Control F now. So basically that's the same ARN I have provided here, which is actually been declared with the OpenID Connect trust, okay? That's the reason assume to role, right? So role to assume is this is the role, yeah? And you are just giving some dummy name to the session, because every time you do a connection, it is nothing but it's a special session. Okay, here there is no storage of credentials. Every time you get a fresh session token, and the duration of the session token will be as per the defined. Okay, all right. The next one is the region. Okay, so in which region you want to assume this role. For example, here I want to assume in the US East one, and that's the reason this has been dynamically done here. Yeah, and then okay, so once this step is completed, basically you will end up with establishing a connection to the AWS account, and then you have the live session, and you can perform the task on the AWS account. Okay, so here I'm going to run an AWS CLI command to get the parameter, that is AWS SSM get parameter. I have stored this SSM parameter. I'm going to show you that. So if I go to the this one, all right, so this is my AWS SSM page of US East one. So this is US East one, and this is my AWS account, right? And currently I'm in a system manager, that is SSM. In this one, I have created a parameter called some dummy parameter, that is hello AWS GitHub -OIDC, and that is what I'm getting here with using the GitHub Actions. Okay, that is AWS SSM get parameter name equal to hello AWS GitHub OIDC, and query or get the parameter value. Yeah, and also finally I'm just running a CLI command called AWS STS get caller identity, which actually tells who is this, who is the connection is, who is actually whose session is actually running. That's what it will be returned here. Okay, so this is very simple and straightforward demo that which will help you to understand how does OIDC works. Okay, and this is a demo, right? So now I have completely walked you through the steps. Okay, and this is the only configuration I did on my repository, nothing else. Okay, this is just to understand how does OIDC connect. Okay, and basically our focus was only on the workflow definitions. Okay, apart from that, I have not done any configurations in the settings, like I didn't go to the secrets and configure the secret. I not nothing. I didn't do any configuration in the settings except defining the workflow file, and that is enough for establishing a connection and running my deployments basically. Okay, so I'm going to commit. I have just added some dummy changes. If you see, I have added some comment. So I'm going to do this one. So demo comment. Yeah, I'm going to commit this and synchronize this one. Basically, I'm pushing the changes to the main branch, and that's what we have declared in the sense, hey GitHub Action, just invoke whenever somebody is pushing to the main branch. Okay, that's what it tells, right? So now let's go back to our GitHub repo. So this is the GitHub repo. This is IAM user. This is the GitHub user, and this is my the repository. Okay, since we move the changes, we should see GitHub Actions running. Here you go, right? So AWS OIDC connect demo, and that has successfully run within 25 seconds. Yeah, and I'm going to walk you through the logs of this OpenID connect, and that would conclude the demo of my demo of this video. All right, so basically if you see setup job, okay, that is a default job for every GitHub Actions, and then it actually starting to clone. Okay, so I'm going to show you what is this. So basically git clone the repository. Yeah, and that is the task. Git clone the repository task has went green, and then configure the AWS credentials. Okay, this is the core task. Configure AWS credentials. This is the core task which actually leverages the OIDC connect or OpenID connect way of establishing the connection to the AWS account. Okay, if I can explain this one, so this is what it does. Okay, basically it is using this API of GitHub Action, that is AWS -connection / configure AWS credentials @version1. Okay, and then it uses these parameter. It actually gets the ARN of the row that it needs to assume. It is also asking you for session name and in which region it has to establish create a session, and the audience here is nothing but the service to which it has to the service it has to use to assume this row, that is STS service, right? And this is the US East is the region again. Yeah, basically with this configuration it has successfully established the connections. Okay, and then it actually, once the connection has been established, you can go ahead and perform the actual task that you can only do when you have a access on the AWS account, or when you have a session running, right? When you have a live access session is running with AWS, right? And that's where it has run the print AWS SSM parameter. I'm going to explain that. Print assume road, sorry, we will see this print AWS SSM parameter. Basically it has run a CLI command called AWS SSM get parameter. This is the name, this is the query value, right? and that's what you see here. If I can open this is the output of that command. Okay, and I'm going to show you. So if I open this parameter, you see cloudquicklabs, which is my channel name, has been returned. Yeah, and then we go to the next one, the print assume role. In the sense, it basically just we are running a command called AWS STS get caller identity. This is the command it ran, right? And then automatically it has returned the caller identity. That is a and so this is what it. So if you see here, this is very unique, right? It actually does not telling you what is the user, nothing, right? It just tells, I'm just a simple STS session that I'm running on this account. That's what this returns. Okay, and this is what it presents. Okay, so if you see here, this is the user ID, account number is not been printed, and this is the ARN. This is a sample session ARN. Yeah, all right. And finally these are the checkout tasks being done by the GitHub Actions. Okay, all right. So basically this is how. Okay, so this is how we leverage. Basically this is how we leverage the the GitHub Actions. Okay, this is how we actually establish a connection to the AWS account without using any credentials, and actually finally performing the required deployments. Okay, so basically this is a very matured way of this is the very matured way of doing the CI/CD job at the GitHub Actions nowadays. Okay, all right. So with that note, I will conclude my demo. Thank you very much for watching my videos. A kind request, please do subscribe my channel. That would really encourage me a lot. So with that note, let's see you in the next video. Thank you. Thanks a lot.